What's a story, amigos? This is Kino with some cool stories for today's story time.
Today, The Adventures of Maxie, the taxi-riding dog, read by Gedde Watanabe.
"Stop, thief!" a woman cried out. And in a flash, I made a dash as Jim cheered me on with a shout.
"Oh, Maxie!"
A man stole her purse. And to make matters worse, all her groceries had spilled on the ground.
And the incredible story of a determined mouse who learns how to surf.
He learned to ride the waves kneeling, then standing. He learned the pull-out, the stall, the cutback.
And will there be enough cookies for everyone? Find out as Lois Williams reads our last story.
"That's one each," said Sam and Victoria. "They smell as good as your grandma's," said Joy. "And look as good," said Simon.
Major funding for Storytime is made possible by a grant from Helen and Peter Bain, so that families everywhere can share the joy of reading with their children. Additional funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, by the annual financial support from viewers like you, and by the National Endowment for Children's Educational Television.
You know, I don't know where he is. He's usually very punctual for our story time.
That's strange. He said for me to be here at this time, and he said he'd have some books for me here.
I wonder where he is. Do you think I should call him? He lives close by.
Oh, well, yeah.
I've been here with my friends all along, and you didn't even see me.
Oh, Kino, you are one of a kind.
Yep. I am special.
Oh, well, Mr. Special, your friend Gedde has been waiting here to read some books for our story time.
Hey, Gedde, what's the story, pal?
Well, Mr. Special, did you bring those books that you told me about?
Oh, Gedde, does pizza have cheese on top? Do dogs bark? Do cats have elbows? I got the books right here. Come on down, Gedde.
Let's go to the story circle, Gedde.
We are ready for some cool stories. Yeah, this makes me happy all over. Hi.
You gonna sit on my lap, Justin?
Great.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi, Gedde. I left a book there for you, Gedde. Uh-oh, you're sitting on it.
Well, I guess this is the story seat, huh?
Good one, Gedde. Well, the book you just sat on is about a dog named Maxie who rides all day long in a taxi with his owner, Jim, the driver of the taxi. Tough but nice, streetwise Maxie.
Streetwise Maxie. That means he could take good care of himself in the city.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, that's kind of neat. He's tough but nice, and he likes people. You know, I have a dog, and he's nice, and he likes people, but I don't know how tough he is.
Yeah.
I have a dog.
Oh, you do?
You do?
I do. I have two.
You have two dogs?
My dog's name is Tesla.
Tesla. Well, this is Maxie. And I'm going to read you Maxie the Hero, okay? And this was written by Deborah and Sal Baraka and pictures by Mark Buhner.
Oh, good. Let's hear about Maxie.
Here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, this is a dog named Maxie. Jim drives a big taxi, and I'm his dog, Maxie. Each morning, we rise with the sun. We greet our boss, Lou. Have a biscuit or two, then set out to make our first run. The day is just dawning, and Jim is still yawning. We drive down the street to the pier. There's no one around, and you can't hear a sound but the toot of a tug that draws near. Hey, can you take us uptown to the Hotel Crown? Asked two sailors who just come ashore. We sailed in from Tahiti. I'm Al. He's Petey. Never saw a real sailor before.
It rhymes.
It does. That's right. This story rhymes, doesn't it? Well, we drive up the street and hear a drum beat. We see a parade passing by. The music's so loud. There's such a huge crowd watching giant balloons in the sky. Ooh. It's already noon. Lunchtime so soon. We head for Joe's Frankfurter cart. Jim always buys 3. 2 for him, 1 for me. And after a blueberry tart. We heard someone calling. Hey, my meatballs, they're falling. It's a chef with a tray of spaghetti. I'm late for the wedding. Across the town I'm heading. And please try to keep the cab steady. Then we got quite a shock. When we drove around the block, there were 3 boys who had the same face. We triplets, they said. Call us Ed, Ned, and Fred. Our ball team just took 2nd place. We dropped off the boys, then heard a loud noise. Stop, thief! A woman cried out. And in a flash, I made a dash as Jim cheered me on with a shout. Oh, Maxie! A man stole her purse. And to make matters worse, all her groceries had spilled on the ground. They were rolling tomatoes and bouncing potatoes and peaches and pears by the pound. The thief tried to flee. It was now up to me. I had to run faster to catch him. I was close to his heel, and he slipped on a peel. And at last, I was able to snatch him. He gave me a fight, but I held on so tight. The police came along very fast. The crowd yelled, hooray! As they led him away. The big chase was over at last. Whew. Yeah. Next day in the paper, they told of the caper. My picture appeared on page 1. Jim patted my head. You're a hero, he said. I'm proud of you. That was well done. Next, I loved my new fame. People knowing my name. What a brave dog you are, they would shout. That's him, there goes Maxie, and look, there's his taxi. We'd hear as he traveled about. As another day ended, we made some new friends, had lots of adventures too. Tomorrow, there's more. Who knows what's in store? Come along, I'll be looking for you. Do you like that? Yeah! Good.
I want to tell you a story about this book. You see, the Barakas, they're the writers of this book. They once found an actual cab driver that drove around with a dog in his car. They were so surprised, they ran home and wrote their first book, which was called The Adventures of Taxi Dog. You know that one, don't you, Justin?
So do I.
Do you, Alex? Have any of you ever had something so wonderful happen to you that you wanted to write it down?
You know, one time I went fishing with my dad, and I put a marshmallow on my line, and I caught a fish that was so gigantic, so huge, so stupendous, that he wouldn't even fit in the boat.
With a marshmallow?
Yeah. A giant marshmallow, almost 2 feet wide.
Almost 3 feet long?
Almost, yeah, come to think of it, almost 3 feet long.
I want to read another one.
You
want to read another
I'd
story?
love to read another one.
I'm not going to read
17 more?
1,000.
I'll fall asleep. I'll be doing this. I'll be going, and then I would be falling asleep.
Oh, well, this story
for sure.
is really fun. It's about a surfing mouse, if you can believe that.
I think I've seen this story at Longden School.
Did you, Justin?
I think.
Can I tell you about this book?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
This book is about a surfing mouse that almost gets into big trouble with a big fish. Would you read it for us, Gedde?
Yeah, come on,
Surfing
Gedde.
mouse, huh?
Uh-oh, wait a minute. I have to get something. Just a second.
What?
What's he doing?
This story calls for my shades.
All right, gnarly,
Awesome, huh?
dude.
Yeah.
I guess surf's up. I guess we better start reading Broderick, huh?
Totally, man.
Oh, wow. Well, this is Broderick by Edward Ormondroyd and illustrated by John Larec.
Yeah.
You ready?
Ready.
Surf's up?
Ready.
All right.
Surf's up.
In the broom closet of a house by a lake, there once lived a young mouse named Broderick. He was passionately fond of books. Fortunately for him, the children of the house loved books too. They brought armloads of them from the library every week. The children read the books during the day, and Broderick chewed on the bindings during the night. He always judged a book by its cover. One night, Broderick came upon a book that had been left open. There was a portrait of a mouse on the title page. He was so fascinated that he read the book 5 times in a row and forgot to chew the cover. Amazing, he thought. Why didn't I know about this before? He became so eager to read that he couldn't think of anything else. He never chewed on a book now unless it was about cats. What he particularly loved were stories about famous mice. He simply could not read too often about Norman, who was the doorman at the art museum and winner of the sculpture contest. Amos, who guided Ben Franklin in almost every important step of his career. Miss Bianca, Niles and Bernard, who rescued a Norwegian poet from the dungeon of the Black Castle. And Anatole, who became the first vice president in charge of cheese tasting at the Duval Cheese Factory in Paris. Broderick began to take long walks by the lake, listening to the waves and dreaming dreams of glory. I, too, will make my mark in the world, he thought. The other mice in the house, they laughed at his ideas. Just being a mouse is a full-time career in itself, they said. What more do you want? I want to do something that no mouse has ever done before, Broderick answered. But he didn't know what that might be. One night, there was a different kind of book on the floor. As Broderick read it, his whiskers twitched and his tail began to tremble. Eureka, he thought. Here's my career at last. He read the book and studied the pictures for many hours. There was only one thing he needed. In the light of the early dawn, he searched the house for it from basement to attic. Finally, he found an old tongue depressor in the medicine cabinet. Since there was nothing better, it would have to do.
He used it.
That's right. And he made it smooth with a scrap of sandpaper and waxed it with a candle end. Then he raced down to the lake, carrying the tongue depressor over his head and shouting, "Surf's up!" 3 minutes later, he had his first wipeout. Broderick persisted in spite of hundreds of wipeouts, fatigues, head colds, and other discouragements. In order to be close to his work, he built a small cabana on the beach. He spent almost every daylight hour in the water, and many moonlight ones as well. And as the weeks and the months went by, he gradually mastered the art of surfing. Well, he learned to ride the waves kneeling, then standing. He learned the pull-out, the stall, the cutback. He could do the foot to the rear turn, the leaning turn, the kick turn. Ooh. He learned to walk the board, to ride on one foot, to do the head dip, and to hang 10. As a matter of fact, by using the tip of his tail, he could hang 11. By the time he could ride a wave while doing the handstand, Broderick felt that he was ready to make his name in the world. He packed a few simple belongings and said goodbye to the other mice. They all shook their heads, more convinced than ever that he was crazy. It was generally thought that he would come to a bad end. Broderick smuggled himself aboard an eastbound bus and had an eventful trip to the coast. The passengers were so careless with their crumbs that he became a trifle plump and had to go on a diet. One sparkling afternoon, the bus arrived at the seaside, and Broderick hopped off. The air smelled deliciously of salt and hot dogs and suntan lotion. Gulls creaked in the sky, and the rumble of surf sounded over the dunes. Broderick's tail began to tremble with excitement. Holding his surfboard over his head, he raced up the warm slope of the dunes. He never reached to the top. Suddenly, the sunlight was blotted out. A terrible rustling noise was heard just above overhead. And before he could even twitch a whisker, he was snatched into the air by an hungry seagull. The only thing that saved Broderick from being instantly swallowed was his surfboard, which became stuck crosswise in the gull's bill. The intrepid mouse quickly recovered his wits. He lashed out with his tail, and in a voice that shook with indignation cried, "Unbeat me, villain!" The gull was so astonished at the way his lunch was behaving that he dropped it, and Broderick plunged down into the Atlantic. He kept diving under the surface until the gull became discouraged and flew away. Then he climbed out and sat on the board. The salt water made him blink and sneeze. Something tickled his tail. He looked down and saw a large fish sniffing at it. He jerked it out of the water and wrapped it around his neck. He had never dreamed that any waves anywhere could be so enormous. My doom is sealed, he thought in despair. If the gulls don't get me, the fishes or one of these waves will. Farewell, fame! A huge swell rose up under him. As he went up, the face of his surfboard began to slide forward. Very well, Broderick thought. Doomed I may be, but at least I can go to my doom in style. He stood up. Oh, yes. But he didn't. He stood up, made a smart kick to the right, and began to shoot across the face of the wave. He had never gone so gloriously fast in his life. His ears rippled and snapped behind him like flags in a gale. He shouted defiance and shook his fist at fate. The wave crested behind him. Glancing back, he saw to his amazement that a young man was racing down toward him on a sleek fiberglass board. Hold your breath! The young man shouted. He knelt and seized Broderick in his cupped hands just before the collapsing wave wiped them both out. The young man's name was Tim. He carefully squeezed the water out of Broderick, gave him artificial respiration, and took him home. While Broderick was recovering, Tim made him a beautiful surfboard out of balsa wood and painted it a brilliant red. They decided that Tim would be Broderick's manager and that they would go on tour together. After a few weeks spent in polishing their routines, they flew to Southern California. Broderick made his professional debut at Malibu Beach. He dazzled the crowd with his sun-bleached fur, deeply tanned tail, and superb display of hot doggy. Whenever Broderick went, he created a sensation. Police had to control the crowds. The sale of binoculars and telescopes soared. When the surf was rough, Tim rode the waves with Broderick, daringly balanced on his finger. When the waves were small and smooth, Broderick and Tim surfed side by side with the grace and precision of a ballet dancer. Sometimes Broderick rode his board in the bow wave of Tim's board. On very calm days, Broderick took to water skis. He was towed by a battery-powered motorboat. And when he was going fast enough, a kite fastened to his shoulder carried him high into the air. He demonstrated his steely nerves by shooting between the pilings of Huntington Beach Pier. Broderick and Tim went on the round world tour. Hundreds of thousands of fans watched them in the surf, Mexico, Hawaii, Australia, and Africa. Millions followed every move on television. Wealthy and loaded with honors, Broderick eventually retired from public life. He built a modest chalet on the shore of the lake where he had first learned his art. Here he spent his declining years entertaining, writing his memoirs, talking to young, aspiring young mice who flocked from far and wide to hear his words of encouragement. He also sent a large, anonymous donation to the library. It had always bothered his conscience that he had chewed up so many bindings in his heedless youth. The end.
Oh, that was great. Oh, that was terrific.
Boy, you know what? I really like this story because no matter what, all his friends made fun of him, but he decided to learn how to surf, and he did it. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, man, if Broderick were my friend, I'd invite him home for dinner, and we'd have lots of pizza.
Oh, well, how about for dessert, a cookie?
Oh.
Well, isn't the other book that you brought about cookies?
Yep. I invited a teacher from my school, to read it.
Oh, yes, I know. And I'm so glad she's with us. Hello, Miss Lois. How are you?
I'm delighted to be here, and I have a special surprise.
Surprise! Oh, I love surprises.
I love it.
Me too.
Cookies?
Will you please read this book for us, Miss Lois?
Oh,
Miss
Miss
Lois,
Kristen.
I have that book.
Here, Miss Lois, why don't you take the story seat, and I'll watch your cookies.
Oh, cookies. Oh, man. Just make sure they get over here, please. A cookie and a story. The perfect sandwich.
All right.
Kino asked me to read his favorite story for today, and it is called The Doorbell Rang by Pat Hutchins. She wrote the story and she drew the pictures. This is a kind of a short story, so it's really important to look at the pictures too at the end. I want to see how many things you saw happening in these pictures. There is a cat, I think, in every single picture, so watch for it. There we are. We begin. The doorbell rang. You can see it's in the kitchen, and you can see there are cookies. I've made some cookies for tea, said Mom. Good, said Victoria and Sam. We are starving. Share them between yourselves, said Ma. I made plenty. That's 6 each, said Sam and Victoria. They look as good as Grandma's, said Victoria. They smell as good as Grandma, said Sam. No one makes cookies like Grandma, said Ma, as the doorbell rang. It was Tom and Hannah from next door. Come in, said Ma. You can share the cookies. That's 3 each, said Sam and Victoria. They smell as good as your grandma, said Tom. And look as good, said Hannah. No one makes cookies like Grandma, said Ma, as the doorbell rang.
Again?
It was Peter and his little brother. Come in, said Ma. You can share the cookies. That's 2 each, said Victoria and Sam. They look as good as your grandma, said Peter, and smell as good. Nobody makes cookies like Grandma, said Ma, as the doorbell rang. Good for you. It was Joy and Simon and their 4 cousins. Come in, said Ma. You can share the cookies.
1.
That's 1 each, said Sam and Victoria. They smell as good as your grandma, said Joy. And look as good, said Simon. No one makes cookies like Grandma, said Ma, as the doorbell rang. And rang. Oh, dear, said Ma as the children stared at the cookies on their plates. Perhaps you better eat them before we open the door. We'll wait, said Sam. It was Grandma with an enormous tray of cookies. How nice to have so many friends to share them with, said Grandma. It's a good thing I made a lot.
Oh.
And no one makes cookies like Grandma, said Ma, as the doorbell rang. Good for you.
Well, that's all the story time we have for today. You know, besides Broderick, though, there are a lot of other famous mouses. There are.
Yep. My favorite is Anatole by Eve Titus. What's yours, Mara? Yeah, there it is.
Oh, well, I like Frederick. And it was written by Leo Leone. Frederick. That reminds me a little bit of Broderick.
Yeah, they even sound a little alike, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. And that is it for today's story time. Please come again to share books and stories with us.
Excellent. More exciting stories next time?
That's right. Goodbye, friends. And remember, keep a story in your heart.
Hey, wait a minute. What about the cookies?
Oh. Cookies?
Yeah.
Where are the cookies?
I see them.
Oh, I want some cookies. I want one.
All right.
Today's Storytime books are Maxie the Hero by Deborah and Sal Baraka, pictures by Mark Buhner. Broderick by Edward Ormondroyd, illustrated by John Larek. The Doorbell Rang by Pat Hutchins. Frederick by Leo Leone. And Anatole by Eve Titus, pictures by Paul Galdone. You can find these and other books at your local library.
Major funding for Storytime is made possible by a grant from Helen and Peter Bain, so that families everywhere can share the joy of reading with their children. Additional funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, by the annual financial support from viewers like you, and by the National Endowment for Children's Educational Television. Storytime is a production of KCET Los Angeles.